Welcome to Microsoft Excel 2019, Lesson 7 by Megan Reese. In this lesson, we're going to do some much more advanced items. These are things that would not appear on the MOS test, but are really fun and exciting and cool that you can do in Excel. So this is designed for advanced students who have completed the MOS test or have completed lessons 1 through 6 and are ready for a little bit more. So in this lesson, we're going to be learning about VLOOKUP tables. Then we're going to be learning about data validation and index match. And finally, we'll be learning about macros and then kind of how all of these four things can connect to each other and interact with each other to do different things. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first advanced function we're going to learn is called a VLOOKUP. And VLOOKUP, what it does is it looks at a set of data. So you have to have data somewhere in your document. And it's looking up a number or whatever's in your first column, and it's going to tell you all the things associated with that number. So I might come over here and type in a 24, and it will automatically pop up and tell me the description and the price. You know, or maybe I type in a customer number and the customer number's name pops up, right? So it's just giving me that information. So I would, what I want to do for this is there are 4 parts to a VLOOKUP table. Now I could just type it in. I usually just type in the title, but sometimes it's helpful if you go to the function menu because it will break it down for you. So we're going to start there. So I've got a VLOOKUP here and the VLOOKUP value. So the first thing it wants to know is what am I looking up? Okay. So actually I'm going to cancel this and put a number in here. So let's say I put 24 in here. Okay. So I'm going to come in here, do VLOOKUP. The lookup value is the 24. It's the number. I'm looking up this number that matches something over here. Okay. And then the table array is where do I find the information? Well, it's right here. Now it could be in another sheet or something, right? But it's where is the information going to come from? Where's the 24? What does it correspond with? Okay. And then the column index number. Which column am I looking for? This column or this column? In this case, it's either going to be 1, 2, or 3, but 1 is I've already used, right? So column 2. Okay. And the range lookup is the logical. Do I want it to be exact or not? Okay, so this is going to be true or false. If it's false, then you want the exact word or the exact number. If it's false or if it's true, then you want approximate. And I'll show you in a minute why you would want approximate, but we're going to do false. Okay, and I click OK and it actually pops it up right there. So it looks up 24 and it knows that that is ruler. Okay, if I were to type in a 19 here, it would look up pen. If I looked at 27, it would look up eraser, right? So it wants to know this box right here, how does it coordinate with the data that's over here? I could do the same thing here, equals VLOOKUP, open parentheses. I'm going to click on the area I want it to go to, the number, the lookup value. I'm looking up number 27. Here is my data right here, comma. And then the column, this time I'm doing price, so I'm going to do column 3 because it is the third column that I've highlighted. And then I'm going to do false because I want it to be accurate. I want it to be 100% correct. Okay, so it gives me the $1 over here. Now here's the problem though. What if I'm like, oh, okay, now I want to do it again. I want to do number 26 or something, right? So I'm just going to autofill down, and I autofill these down, and say I do number 18. Well, I'm going to have a problem. It's not going to work because when I created this, this was my data range. But as you guys know, you learned way back in lesson 2, when you autofill down, it's going to rewrite it. So now number 18 is not on the list. It's going to move it down each time, right? So there's 2 ways around that. Again, this is not new information to us. We need to either add an absolute value to it. So then when I autofill down, it's the same. Right? So an absolute value will keep it the same. This doesn't have a number, so that's why it's behaving like that. Okay. So either I need to add an absolute value or I can name the range. So I could highlight over here and call this range supplies, right? And then when I'm writing my VLOOKUP, I can say this comma supplies and column 2 or 3 and false. Okay. And then I can autofill down just as easily. So you want to do one of those 2 things. Pay attention in the assignment, however. In the assignment, it will always tell you whether to name it. If you just name it and the assignment doesn't tell you to name it, you might not get your check mark because it has to be exact from what I expect it for the check mark to come about. So don't name the range unless in the assignment it tells you to name it, okay? Because I also want you to get practice writing it this way with the absolute values. So that's what a VLOOKUP table can do. Now I want to show you why you would use approximate. Okay, let's say that I have Let me get rid of this. Okay, so let's say I have, this is my points. 200 points, you're level 1, 300 points, you're level 2, and so forth. For some reason, I have a point system. So I have my system here. This is my data that I want to take it from. And then maybe these are my clients, and this is how many points they have, and I want to tell them what level they're on. Okay, well, the problem is there isn't a 254 over here. There's not a 448. These exact numbers aren't in here, right? So I'm going to do equals VLOOKUP. I'm going to click on the number, comma, do the range, and since I don't have it named, I'm going to push F4, okay, comma, and then I want to know column 2 because I want to know what level they are, and then I'm going to do true instead of false. And what that does is it gives me an answer. If I were to type false in here, it's going to say NA. It's going to say we can't find 254. It's not over there. It doesn't exist. But when I say true, it's looking for the closest answer that is accurate. So 254 between once I hit 300, I'm at level 2, right? So at 254, I'm still at level 1. So I can autofill that down. It's going to work just fine. So this is great for grades or whatever. So this is the thing. You could have done that with an if function. In fact, there's a part of your assignment where you have to do the same thing with, very similar to this, with and without an if function. If I was going to do it with an if function, then I would have to write it out like equals. So if I was doing this, let's say if I was doing this with an if function, same exact thing. Okay, I would do equals if this is greater than this, then 4 if, or actually I think in your example you guys have to type it in, 500. If it's greater than or equal to 500, then 4 it, comma, like this is such a pain, right? If this is greater than or equal to 400, then 3. If A2 is greater than or equal to, what is it? 300 to otherwise 1, or if A2 is less than 2 or 200 or 300 then 1 or something like that, right? I have to, what a nightmare. Like what a pain is that? And yes, it will still work, but there's a million places where your syntax, where you can mess this up. Like that's just crazy. So it's a lot easier to use a VLOOKUP, okay? But it does the exact same thing, okay? So this is just showing me approximate. And I'm saying if it's greater than this, greater than that, same thing. But again, sometimes the VLOOKUP table is going to be a much slicker way of getting the same results. So the next thing I want to show you is an HLOOKUP table, which is the same as VLOOKUP, except it goes a different direction. So the VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup, right? HLOOKUP stands for, guess it, horizontal lookup. So it's looking for stuff that's going across, and we're counting rows instead of columns. So when I say rows, then I'm referring to which row it's in instead of which column it's in. So let's say I wanted to know about a jersey number. I wanted to be able to type in the jersey number and the name of the person whose jersey that is comes up, right? So I would do equals HLOOKUP. I click on the number I'm looking for. Then I highlight the array. I'm going to do F4 on that, comma, and I'm looking for row 2, false. I want it to be exact. And there it goes, finds Jones. If I type in 63, it'll find James, okay? Okay, so that ends the section on VLOOKUP, but we will be using VLOOKUPs later on as we learn other things. We'll incorporate it into our data validation and our index match. So on data validation, what data validation says is you're looking for a certain type of information, and if the information that's being entered doesn't match, then you give them an error, okay? So if we go into data, this is in the data tab, and data validation right here and data validation right there. You can see lots of different ways to do it. So if you can pull this down, these are all the different types of data validation you can do. An input message will it'll pop up and tell you stuff if you type something in, and an error alert could come up. It could say stop, it could warn you, it could give you additional information, but it just pops up to say, oh, you did that wrong, or you need to fix that, or whatever, okay? So the first thing is it could be the width of a word. Let's say I'm doing a phone number, okay? So 801, okay, I have a phone number in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and format that like a phone number. So that's under special, I believe. Okay. So a phone number is always going to be 10 digits, right? So I want to set it up so that the text length is always 10 digits. So I'm going to have other places. I'm going to be entering phone numbers here, right? So I'm going to highlight all the places I want this to show up. I'm going to go to data, data validation, and in settings, and I'm going to go text length. Okay, and I'm going to say the text length has to be equal. Now you have a lot of options here. In my case, I want it to be equal to 10. Okay, it can be 10 digits long, 10 characters long. Now I can add an error alert to stop that says wrong length or something. Entry must be 10 digits long or something like that. So what happens now is if I enter something in that's not 10 digits, I get a little error. Wrong length, entry must be 10 digits long, and it warns me that I've done something wrong. Even if it's too long, okay, I'm going to get the same error. Okay, but if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's fine. Okay, although I didn't format it. But so that's just text length. That's one of the ways you can use data validation. There are other options in here, like let's say I highlight this and I go into data validation and I could say a whole number. It has to be a whole number between 1 and 10. I click OK. If I type any of those numbers in there, I'm okay, but if I don't, I get an error. This is what it does if I don't set up a restriction myself. This just says it doesn't match the restrictions, but it might be confusing to someone to be like, well, what restrictions? What are you talking about? So that's when you probably want to come in here and add an error alert that explains why. Oh, stop, it's not long enough, you know, must be between 1 and 10. And I click OK, and now if I type in the wrong number or something, it's going to tell me what I'm doing wrong and why it's not letting me enter that data. Okay, so that's one of the things that data validation can do. You can also do an input message. Okay, so maybe you're like, hey, I'm not sure how to do this math, right? Like, I want someone to have something that says, I want to tell you what to do. So I'm going to put an input message in here that says, you know, multiply the, let me move this out of the way so I can see what I'm doing, the base price by 10. I click OK. Now when I click on it, there's a little input message that tells me, oh, I need to multiply the base price by 10, right? So it's a way to just kind of, it's just an input. It tells you what to do. So if there's something confusing and you're not sure how to enter it, or you know your customers, maybe you're creating a database that your employees will use, and you don't want them to get confused, you can put directions in there so they know what to do. Okay. I mean, I could have done that here, right? Instead of all of your directions in here, I could have made them data validations, right? Like all the directions that you guys read that tell you how to do things. Technically, I could have done it as a data validation that tells you what to do, right? Now there is another one that I'm going to show you how to do, which is using a formula or a function. And so this one's kind of weird. I don't think that you might not be able to figure it out on your own. So I'm going to walk you through it. It's directly in your assignment where we want to figure out if there's any duplicates. So instead, what it does is it gives you an error if you type something that's already been typed in. So I want it to say, if I type in yellow, it's going to say, oh, that's a duplicate. You've already typed that. You can't have that. Okay. So I'm going to do it for the whole thing. Okay. I'll just do that. I'm going to go into data validation. I'm going to use COUNTIF because I need to count up all the things that match. Okay. So I'm going to do a custom, and I'm going to do the following formula. I'm going to do equals COUNTIF, because I'm counting, and then I'm telling it where to count. So I'm going to type in D:D. Okay, and that just means all of column D. That's how you type, instead of saying D4 through D7 or something, if you do just D:D, you're saying the entire column D, right? And I'm going to go ahead and put some A4s on that. And I'm going to do column, and then I want to do D3, okay, this number. And I'm going to do close it parentheses and equals 1. Okay, so it's telling me if it equals 1. I'm going to click OK. And now if I type green, it says, nope, can't do that. If I type, oops, it's going to get mad at me. If I type yellow, it says there's already, now it's kind of confusing still, right? Because I do not have, let's go back into data validation. I didn't put an error on it, right? I can say duplicate entry, right? Or maybe I could make it a warning or something. Let's just see what happens when I do warning. So now if I type in blue, it's going to say, oh, there's a warning. It doesn't match. Now this warning lets me continue. It lets me still do it. Okay, stop won't let me do it at all. And the warning will let you continue to do it. So that's the difference between the two of those. But I type in maroon, I'm going to be fine because that's not in there. But if I type in yellow, I'm going to incur the wrath of my data validation. All right. So that's just another one that's in there that might be a little bit confusing. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, this is the most common one we use, is the data validation, which allows you to do a drop-down menu. I use this for so many different ways and so many assignments and so many things I do. It's kind of fun. So what a drop-down menu is first you have to have, again, like the data validation or the VLOOKUP table, you have to have the information you're going to use elsewhere somewhere in the document. So basically, like say I want to take this, I want to make it a drop-down menu. Okay, I'm going to actually do this right here. So I want to make it so I can do a drop-down menu that shows me all of that. So I'm going to start here. I can highlight the whole thing if I want it to be in all of them, or I can do it on one and then autofill down. So I'm just going to do it on one. I'm going to go to data validation. I'm going to go to list, and then it's asking for the source, so I can just highlight it. Or if I've named the range, I can type in my named range. I click OK. And now it's got this. Now, if you guys, I don't know if you remember way back in lesson 1. Do you guys remember lesson 1? This is what you did in lesson 1. Okay, do you remember this? And you'd pull it down and you'd tell me which one it was. Oh, way back in those days when that was new to you. Now this is a piece of cake, right? But that was me using a data validation like that so that you'd know. Okay, but how does this know to change numbers, right? Like how does this know to give me the point, right? And I'm using I believe a COUNTIF on that one. So anyway, it's kind of interesting how we did that. But that is one way of using a data validation to get a drop-down menu, and that's you seeing me using it, right, to get the points. And so I'm using if functions elsewhere in the document to make that work. But so that's a drop-down menu that you can create. Now you can also create it. Let's say I want to do one here. I could name this size. Okay, and now when I create this drop-down menu, I'm going to do a list. I'm just going to type in equals size. Click OK. And now I have size. And I can go ahead and autofill that down if I want so that it's there for every person. And again, I don't have to do that. I could have highlighted the whole thing and then done my data validation. That would have worked as well. Okay. But that's how you create a data validation drop-down menu. So the real power comes when you combine VLOOKUP table with a drop-down menu, okay? So I'm going to create a price here. I'm going to say equals VLOOKUP green tea, and then this is my price base over here. I want to know what green tea costs. So I'm going to highlight it, okay, F4, and I want to know row 2 or column 2 and false, okay? That's going to bring my price over. And since I put my absolute values in here, I can autofill it down, okay? Now if I were to change that, if I were to say, oh, actually I want avocado, or I want lavender, or I want coconut, it's going to change my price according to what I pick, right? But in this case, this one's a little complicated because I also have size. I have two things. A bubblegum medium is going to cost more than a green tea small or something, right? Because I have a second option here. So I'm actually going to do plus and then do another one. VLOOKUP this one, comma, click on all of that, F4, second column, false, okay? So I've actually added the two together. So now I can pick, you know, oh, I want avocado and I want it in a large, and it's going to figure out the math for me. So I actually did math with the VLOOKUP table. You don't have to do it that complicated in your assignment, but that should give you an idea of kind of how it can work and what it can do. Okay, it's kind of cool. The possibilities get opened up when you combine a drop-down menu with a VLOOKUP table. Now, I've used VLOOKUP tables for a long time, and I love them, and they're great. But there is this thing called index match, and for a long time, whenever you Google index match, they'll say, oh, it's so much better, it's so much more powerful than a VLOOKUP table. And I'm like, what? You know, like I didn't understand it. And it is more complicated to use. Like it has more pieces to it than the VLOOKUP table. But it's more powerful because it can go from left to right. Right now, if I wanted to do a VLOOKUP table, I cannot look up this phone number and find this customer number. I can't go from this to this. A VLOOKUP table will not work from right to left. It only works from left to right, okay? Index match, if you combine those two, they will work together. They can go in any direction. So they have a lot more freedom. But we're actually going to break it down a little bit because the index match is really, there's an index function and there's a match function, okay? Individually, index and match are kind of lame, honestly. They don't do a whole lot. But when you combine them, they work really well. So in your lesson, I'm trying to break it down for you so that you can see what an index does, what a match does, and then how the two combine with each other. So we're going to start out with the index, okay? So index, all it does is tells me what is at the intersection of two numbers, okay? It's like when you're doing a graph and you're like, it's 2 over and up 3, what's there, right? So I'm going to go to index and I'm going to highlight my array, okay? And I just put these numbers for reference. I can say, okay, how many rows? I want to know what's on row 20 and column 3. And then it returns that to me, right? Row 20, column 3, there it is, right? That's all index does. Okay, equals index. Let's do the same array, which by the way, let's name it, okay? That you can named ranges are awesome as well. So I'm gonna highlight this and name it and call it customers. Except did I spell that wrong? Okay, so I'm gonna come here and do equals index customers. Oh, yeah. And I want to do row, I don't know, 14 and column 6. And then it's going to respond, that's a 3. It gives me a 3 right there. Okay, so by itself, that's kind of a pain. I mean, who's going to want to sit there and count, like, and actually try to find what the references are? You don't know how many columns and rows it is. That's why we're going to need match. Match is going to look that up for us, right? But we're not quite there yet. When we look in here, and we're going to go into index in here like we did with our VLOOKUP, is it gives us all the parts that we're looking for. So notice I had 2 options there. Sorry, I went too fast. So when I go to index here, it gives me 2 options. It says, oh, do you want to do an array or a reference? We just did an array. It's just saying I want to check this one group of data, okay? A reference is if you have more than one set of areas, okay? So let me get some data for that. So this next one is a reference. So a reference is when you want to take an entire row of information instead of just one piece. And so in this case, it has a third element to it. So instead of just knowing the column and the row, like in this one, I just needed to know, okay, it's in this column or this row and this column. When you're doing a reference, I need to know which set of data. Is it in week 1, week 2, or week 3? Which row is it? And I don't actually need the column because I'm bringing the entire thing over. Okay, so there are 4 things you have to do to make this work. Okay, number 1, highlight the 4 places. If I want 4 things to come over, 1, 2, 3, oh, there's 5. If I want 5 things to come over, I need to highlight 5 things so the answer knows where to come. Okay, that's the first thing. The next thing is whenever you're using a reference, you have to use a double parentheses because you're doing like, you know, equals index, right? Can't type. Okay, index, and normally I would type in my stuff here, but I actually have to do 2 parentheses because within that index is all of the different things that I'm doing, all the different references I'm using, right? So that's number 2. I'll show you in a second how it works. Number 3, do not have a column reference. You actually type in a 0 for that. So you'll have a number, a 0, and then a number. And then number 4, and this is the weirdest one, you have to do Control-Shift-Enter at the end, okay? So let me show you how it works. It's kind of weird, I know. So I want the answer to appear right here. So I want to know what's going on with Jane in week 2, okay? I want to know what Jane's schedule is for week 2. So I'm going to first start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 answers. That's where I want the answer to appear. Then I type up here and I do equals index, double parentheses, okay? Then I got to highlight all the areas where the answers are, okay? So I'm going to go here, comma, here, comma, here, okay? Again, I could name those if I want to take the time to do it. I'm not going to do that. So that's my second one. Next thing, so once I've entered in all of my references, I need to close that parentheses because remember there's 2 parentheses up here, right? So the inner one is doing this. Now I'm ready for the rest of it. Comma, it's the second part. It's in the 3rd row because Jane is the 3rd name. I'm going to go comma 0, that's for column, but because I'm pulling all 5 of them over, I don't need a column, so I leave it as 0. And it's the week 2, so it's the 2nd week of data. Close the parentheses. Okay, so I've got 2 here, I've got 1 parenthesis here, 1 parenthesis there. Then the weird part, Control-Shift-Enter. And what that does is it puts these little outside thing, but when you do that, it puts these little thingies around it. But when you do that, it pulls it in, right? And then it just pulled all of Jane's information from week 2. Just came in over here. So match feels kind of like the other half of index. It's like neither one of them have much value on their own, but together they're awesome. And so remember the biggest pain about index was that I had to go look it up. If I wanted to know where Benedict Jones is, I had to literally go find it. I'd be like, oh, it's on column 20, row 5 or 4 or whatever. How does that save me any time? Like I have to go look it up anyway. So why do I need a function to do it for me, right? Well, match looks it up for me. Okay. First it has to look up what row it's in and then what column it's in. Okay. So if I'm looking for this name Benedict Jones, and I don't know what row he's in. So I'm going to do equals match, open parentheses. I'm clicking on what I'm looking for. And then I don't know exactly which row he's in, but I know he's in this column. So I'm going to highlight all of them, right? And it's going to be like, oh, yeah, that's column 24 or row 24, right? It finds it in row 24. Now it's wrong because when I highlighted that, by the way, I don't know why that happened. It should be 20. So it gives me 24. That's not correct. That's Johan Demers, right? And I'm looking for Benedict Jones. They're slightly similar. You've got Jones and Johan. They're not exactly the same, okay? And that is because I need to make it exact, okay? So you can choose, there's a third piece to this. 1 is less than 0 exact, greater than -1. A lot like in VLOOKUP. Instead of true and false, though, you're going to do 1, 0, or -1. Now, we're talking about text here instead of numbers, so less than and greater than don't make sense. So I want to do 0. Once I type the 0 in there, oh, okay, 20. It's looking for exactly Benedict Jones, okay? If I don't put that 0 in, it might not catch that. It might find something that is similar, okay? So there's my row. I found my row. Now I'm ready to find my column, so I'm going to do equal match, and I'm looking for this. And I'm not sure which column it's in, but I know it's in row 20. So I'm going to highlight row 20, okay? And it's going to return, oh yeah, that's in column 2. There he is, okay? I didn't put a negative on him. I didn't do the 0, and it didn't hurt me because there's nothing else remotely similar on this column, right? That's the only thing remotely like Benedict Jones. So in that case, it didn't matter. But sometimes you still want to put the 0 in just to be sure that you're doing it right. Okay, so there's match finding me my row and my column. And then I've got it ready for index match. Okay, so in your assignment, you have a page that looks like this. And I'm looking at this part right here on C6 that has index. So I want you to find Tesla Motors first by using the index, then by using match, and then by combining the two. Okay, so we know it's right here. But we're going to go ahead and do this over here with the example we've been working on. Okay, so first I'm going to find Preston Casey just by using index. So I'm going to do equals index. And remember that index doesn't click on anything. It just tells me, oh, it's somewhere in here, right? And then it's going, oh, and actually index is going to use everything, right? It's going to use all the information. It doesn't need to tell me which column or row. I can highlight everything for it, okay? And then I'm going to say, okay, I have to actually go look it up, right? So Preston Casey is in row 8, number 2. So I'm going to do 8/2, close parenthesis. There we go. I found it with index. Okay, kind of a pain. Now let's find it with match. Equals match. I click on the name Preston Casey. I tell it, oh, it's somewhere in here, but I don't know where. Close parentheses, and now it's told me, oh, it's on row 24, right? Although it's not on 24, it's on 20. Remember, on this one I have to do a 0 to say exact, so that it actually finds it on row 8. Okay, because it's very similar to what's in number 20. It's finding that, so I got to be exact on that. Okay, so now I know it's in row 8. So now let's combine the two together. Equals index, and then I'm going to click on the array. I know it's in here somewhere, but instead of typing in 8 and 2 like I did before, I'm going to use match, open parentheses, click on Preston Casey, that's what I'm looking for, and then highlight the same thing I highlighted before, the same amount. And then let's add our 0 at the end because we want to be sure it's exact. And, oh, I should have 2 parentheses there. And there we go. It found it with index match. Okay, so that's your first index match. Let's go through that one more time. Equals index, open parentheses. I am looking, it's somewhere in here. Okay, and then match. This is what I'm looking for, somewhere in here. And then let's add our 0 to make it exact. 2 parentheses because we've got it nested. And there we go. It found Preston Casey. Okay. Woo! That's a lot. Okay. And again, it might seem like kind of a pain, but I didn't have to look it up, right? I just had to know it was in here somewhere. So let's do another one really quickly without doing the first 2 steps. So if I'm looking for, let's do this one. I just want to know where he's at. I could do index, and then I'm going to highlight it somewhere in here. And what if this is long? What if this is like pages and pages long, right? That'd be pretty useful. Okay, and then I'm looking for match. I want to find Abby Olsen or Olin or whatever that name is. Okay, and then I'm going to highlight the information again, close parenthesis twice. There we go, and it probably had trouble because I didn't put my 0 in there. Here we go. Okay, so because it's names, when it's numbers, it's a little more obvious. We could do numbers. Let's try a number. Okay, so if I come over here with this number, equals index somewhere in here, comma, match. I'm looking for this, comma, highlight it again. And this time, if I don't do a 0, I'll probably be okay because it's a number. Oh, that looks like I wasn't. I still needed to do it. So it would find it exactly. There we go. So it still finds it approximate. So you really want to put that 0 in there or else you're going to get something a little bit crazy there. All right. And you may have to do greater or less than in the example depending on what you get. Now, I did want to point out that in your lesson, I know that that syntax is tricky. So I actually have it for you right here. So you're welcome to copy that over and paste it and just kind of keep it where you can see it and just use it as a guide as you're filling everything out, because I know it can get a little bit confusing, but the more you practice it, the more it will make sense to you. Okay. And I'll be honest that this is not something I'd really used before. And as I've just been writing this lesson and using it, I'm starting to go, oh, no, okay, now I get it as I use it more. Now we're going to do next what's called a two-way lookup. Okay, where I'm looking at both things, where I can highlight all the information. It'll tell me both numbers. Because right now, it really only just found me which column it was in. I already told it what column to be in. So we're going to do what's called a two-way lookup. So, and that means I'm going to look up, like, so let's say I want to look up this person, and I want to know their, when their last visit was. Okay, so I want to know when Bertie Belknap last came to visit my shop or whatever it is. Okay, what the date was. Okay. Okay, so I want to set this up so that I can choose a customer and it will tell me the last time that person came in. So I know I can be like, oh, it was the last time they were in. Okay. So I'm actually going to use a data, I don't think this is in your assignment, but I'm going to use a data validation for this just so you can kind of see how it would work. So I'm going to go to data validation, do a list. Okay. I'm going to highlight all these names. I added some more names so that it's a little bit harder to see. Okay. So you can't just guess it. And now I can just pick a person, right? So I want it to be set up so that whenever I choose someone, their last visit, the date of their last visit appears here. So in order to do a two-way lookup, I have to do an index that says it's somewhere in this area. And then I have to do two matches, one for the column and one for the row. The column I need is customer name. The row I need is last visit, right? So I need to set that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into equals index. Oh, wait, sorry. Before you do that, you have to name everything. Now you don't have to name stuff, but it's a lot easier if you do. And that's how it's done in your assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and name everything. I don't need customer. I only need customer name because I know that's where my answers are. And I might name customer. I might have this named. I might have this named. But for our purposes, we only need customer name. One other thing, too, is you've got to have the same origin. You want them all to start in the same thing. So if I'm going to name it this way, and name it this way, and name it that way, either way, it has to all start in the same cell. So starting in K2, I'm going to go do all the customer names, and I'm going to name those. And I'm just going to call that names. Okay. Then I'm going to, again, starting in K2, I'm going to come across here. I call it data, I guess. Okay. Then I got to highlight the whole thing where everything can appear, the whole set of documents. Okay. And we're going to call that list. Okay. So I've got a column, or columns going across. This way is going to be my data. This is names, and the whole thing is list. So because there's three different sets of data I have to use. So I'm going to do equals index, and then I'm going to click on the array, which again, I could just highlight it, but because I named it, I'm going to type in list. Okay, which shows me, okay, all the names. So out of all of this, I'm looking for Joanna Pritchard's last visit. So there's the list. Now I got to use match to find it. First the column, then the row, right? So I'm going to do, I want this name, which is going to be in names, right? And then I'm going to add a 0 because I want to make sure I don't get a name that's kind of close, right? We want to make sure it's exact. Okay, I'm going to close that. And then comma match. I think that's the hardest part to remember, is that you have to actually close the parentheses and start a new one. Okay, and then my second match, I'm looking for the last visit. I need the words last visit, which is in here, right? So B7, last visit, and I want to use the thing called, what did I name it? Data, I think is what I called it, yep. Okay, and 0, I want it to be exact. And I can close that. I think I need 2 of them. There we go. So now my date has appeared. It's saying that Joanna Pritchard's last visit was on 10/16/2008, And if I look her up, I'm not sure where she's at. I don't have this in alphabetical order, so who knows where she is. Okay, right there. That's right, 10-6-18. And if I were to go up here and change it and say, oh, I want Jerry, or I want Reese, or I want, if I want different names, I can choose different names and it will automatically update. Okay, so that's index match. And you may look at that and couldn't I have just used the VLOOKUP table for that? And in this case, you probably could have, right? But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you want to use index match because it is so versatile. It can use when there's lots and lots of data, but it can also do right to left, which you can't do with a VLOOKUP table. So for example, I want to set this up so that not only when I choose a name, right now I've got it set when I choose a name, it tells me the date of their last visit. I also want it to tell me their customer number. But as you see, the problem here is that customer number is to the left of customer name. So I'm looking up Henry Wade or Wade Herbert, and I want to know something that goes to the left of that. VLOOKUP table cannot do that. Okay, it's not able to do that. It won't go backwards. So we're going to use index, and this is not a two-way match, so you don't have to do two matches. You only have to do one. But we're going to go ahead and name the columns. So the columns I want to use, I'm going to name all of my customers. Okay, I'm going to call that just cust, just to save some time. And then the other one I need is my names. So if you were doing this on a regular basis, you would just always have every column named. Okay, so I have my customer column and that's cust and my name column. Those are the two that I need, right? So I'm going to do equals index. Okay, and then I'm going to do my index, which is telling me where I'm looking for. The first thing you want to remember is, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a customer number. So that's the first thing I'm going to type. Okay, I'm not going to do name yet because I don't know what that. I'm looking for the thing I don't know, X, my value I'm looking for is customer number. So that's the index. That's what the index is going to point to. But then I need to match that customer number to the name. So I'm going to do match. Yeah, you have to get a spell right. Okay, and I'm looking up Herbert Wade. And now I'm going to do name because I'm looking up his name over here. So in other words, it's saying match the name Herbert Wade and then find the index for customer in the customer column. Okay, and I'm going to do 0 so I'm sure that it's accurate. Okay, oh, I forgot to add 2 things at the end, but it worked. Okay, so Herbert Wade, I can look over here. I don't know where he's at. I should have put this in alphabetical order. Right there, 840 is his number. That's his customer number, and now that's coming up. So it was able to search something on the left from what was on the right. Okay, and so that is one of the advantages to index match, is it can search any direction that you'd like to go. All right, the next thing we're going to learn about is macros. Macros are basically saving instructions. You push record, you do some repetitive task, and then you turn it off, and it just records that action. So I can push one button, it will do everything all at once. So it's just kind of a shortcut to achieve a lot of stuff. Macros have historically caused problems with viruses, and so Microsoft has put a lot of checks in place for macros. So if you're ever going to use a macro, you have to resave the document as macro enabled, and if you open a document that has macros, you have to enable those macros and say yes, the macros are okay to use. And they do that because virus creators did viruses so that as soon as you opened it, the macro would run automatically and then it would do crazy things to your computer. So macros do have a lot of safeguards around them for that reason, but they are quite valuable. So the one that I'm going to actually show you straight up, the one that you're going to do for part 1 in lesson D for this. So what you're going to do first is you have to get the developer tab. Okay, so you're going to go to File and you're going to go to Options and then go to Customize Ribbon, and you're going to turn on the Developer ribbon. And when you do that, you have a new tab called Developer, which allows you to do all kinds of things. And we're not going to cover very much of what's in here. But we're just going to focus mostly on the macros. Okay, so a macro, I can just go over here and I can say record macro, and I give it a name. Okay, so I can call it macro 8, or I can call it name, or whatever I want to call it, but you can't have any spaces or anything. It can't have any, it has to be very simple. It can only just be one word. Okay, so if you're going to do like my name, then you do something like that, right? Now you can assign it a shortcut key. If you don't assign it a shortcut key, you have to have another way to make it activate, which I'll show you later, but we're going to go ahead and add a shortcut key. You have to be kind of careful though, because if you put like P, Control P is already print, right? You don't want to pick something that's already chosen. So if you hold down the Shift key and you do a capital G, it'll be Control Shift G, which is less likely to be used. I think in this one I told you to do Shift and then the first letter of your first name. So as long as you do a shift there, it's not likely that it's already been assigned to something. So then I click OK, Oh, this one says it's already been assigned. And that's probably because it's, I already did it in a previous assignment. So it's not going to come up. So I'll do Control-Shift-N. I click OK. It is now recording everything I do. Okay. So I'm going to type my name, except I can't spell my name apparently. Okay. And then I'm going to press enter and I'm going to stop recording. Okay. Now if I do Control-Shift-N, 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 it repeats what I did while it was recording. So it's just a shortcut to allow me to do something. So in your assignment, I do ask you to kind of prove that you've done this macro. There's really no way for me to see it by what's on your screen. You could have just typed your name in, I wouldn't know, right? So on your assignment, you'll do your macro here, but then there's this empty space here, and this is where you're going to show me the code of the macro so I know that you actually did do the macro, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do that. So what you do is in the developer tab, you're going to click on macros and your macro should show up there. I'm going to go to step intro and it's actually going to show me my macro. This is the coding that's going on behind it. Okay, here's the name that I called it. This is what it tells me what it was called, active cell. And this is actually the coding of what I did. Okay, I need you to give me a copy of this. Now there's two ways to do that. You can either come down here and type in snip and pull up the snipping tool. Okay, which looks like this. You just click on new and I can take a piece of it and then edit copy. And then when I come back to this, I can paste it. And in your document, in the actual assignment, you'll put it like right here and then kind of resize it. And you'll notice it automatically pulls it in over here. So you can see it. Like, so you don't paste it on this page. You want to paste it here and then the camera will take a picture of it and pull it into the cover sheet automatically. Okay. So you can use a snipping tool. And then the other option, and I think we did this in Word if you've done Word already, but if you haven't, the other option is I'm going to close this again just to make sure it's working. Okay, so let's do that again. So that if you don't want to do it that way or you don't have the snipping tool or something's not working, you can go in here, we do step into, and then I'm actually going to come over to home and it makes it disappear for a second. That's okay. Or insert, and I'm going to go to screenshot. And I'm going to find it. It's right there. And it lets me do a little screenshot. And it actually just screenshots the whole page. So I probably want to crop that down like this. Okay. The reason I find that, at least in my lab, a lot of times that doesn't work. It's blocked with the schools, like blocked the ability to do that. So the snipping tool is more likely to work, but you can try it either way. But that'll get you your picture that you can copy and paste in and show me what you've done. And then if you want to close the VBA, just go ahead and close it. And it will say this will, whatever, just click OK. It's fine. It'll close it. Okay. Okay, we're going to do another kind of macro that it uses formatting. And this one's a little different because we want to use what's called relative references. What that means is that if I apply, no matter where I apply it, it's going to adjust to the new references I put it in. Okay, so I'm going to do it once without it and once with so you can see what it does. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and record a new macro. Okay, so actually let me type a word in here because it's a lot easier when you have a word to look at. So I'm going to do a couple of them over here so I can test it out. Okay, so I don't want the word to be part of the macro. I want it to apply to whatever happens to be typed in there, but I want to be able to see what it's doing. So I'm going to put my cursor here and I'm going to go to record macro and I'm going to call this format and I'm going to do Control Q as my shortcut key. So maybe this is the way that I format headings all the time and I use it a lot and I don't want to have to keep redoing it every time. I want to be able to just apply it to whatever. So I'm going to click OK and then I'm going to say, okay, I want to go across here and I'm going to merge it, change the color, maybe I'm going to make it bigger, change the font, whatever it might be. Okay. So that's what I want it to look like. I'm going to click off of it because it's no longer highlighted. I'm going to go to developer and do stop recording. Okay. Now I'm like, okay, I want to apply this formatting to this heading. So when I do Control Q, watch what happens. It just goes right back and does it in the same spot. It only applied it to where my cursor was. Okay. Now I can be like, oh crap, I forgot to turn on use relative references. So let's run it again. Maybe if I click on this and then I turn on use references, it'll still work. Control Q. No, it didn't. Okay. So I have to turn that on or off if I want it off in the original recording. Okay. So let's go back and put this the way it was. Okay. And I'm going to go now if you make a mistake, which you probably will, when I do macros, even though I've done them a lot, I usually do them like 3 or 4 times before they're exactly what I wanted. So deleting a macro is important. So we're going to go to macros and I'm going to click on the one that I did that I don't like. I'm going to delete that out there. Okay, so it's no longer in there. Now I'm going to try it again. So this time I'm going to keep this off. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to record the macro. We're going to call it format again. And we're going to do Q again. Click OK. And then I'm going to turn on relative references so I'm sure that it is on. Okay. Then I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Okay, so I merged it and centered it and changed the color and whatnot. Maybe change the font, whatever. Okay. So there's my heading. I'm going to click off of it, go to developer and stop recording. And now let's see if it works over here. So I'm going to do control Q and it's going to go through all the process again. And it totally worked. Wherever I put it, it's going to work. Doesn't matter where it is. So that relative references is really important. And the nice thing about it is that let's say I have the word heading over here and I'm going to do it again and relative references is turned off. Doesn't matter because when I run it, control Q, it will turn it on because that's part of the macro is making sure that it gets turned on with it. Okay. Now one warning on this one, when you go in to take a picture of it, it's going to be really big. It had a lot of pieces to it. Okay. It's huge. I don't need you to get every single piece. Like it's fine. Just go in and get roughly, you know what size of room you have. Just get enough that I can see that you started it, format, macro, whatever. That's totally fine. Okay. One thing I want to talk about too is saving this. So once you have recorded a macro, and there are macros in here, you have to resave this. And it will actually prompt you. If I try to save this right now, it's going to tell me that I need to save it as a macro-enabled book. Okay. In fact, it already did. See, it says XLSM. That means it's macro enabled. So what you're going to want to do is make sure to do save as, and when you pull this in, you choose macro enabled workbook instead of just regular workbook. If I save it as a regular workbook, my macros will disappear. They won't be there anymore. So you want to make sure you do macro enabled and click save. And that's just one of the safeguards to make sure that it's not some virus person putting that in there, some virus creator putting that in there to mess people's computers up. Okay. I mean, for it to have macros, it's supposed to have macros. I've cleared that. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is a function macro. So I wanted to teach you a little bit about rand between. And this is a useful little function that I use a lot. Okay. It seems really simple, but it's a great way to make randomizers if you want to randomize something. So I'm going to do equals rand between open parentheses, and then I just give it two numbers, 1 and 100. It will come with a random number between 1 and 100. Okay. And I can autofill that down. And honestly, when you guys see me like with giant lists like this one, I use rand between to get all those numbers. That's how I get big lists of numbers. It's just a lot easier to just do rand between. I would sit there and type in all those numbers. Okay, so it's going to give me random numbers. Now the problem is though, let's say I do another one over here, rand between 1 and 10,000. Do you see how the first one's changed? So my biggest beef with rand between is it won't stay put. As soon as you do anything, they all move. They keep randomizing. And I can't get it to stop randomizing. Okay, so that's kind of irritating. So we're going to go ahead and use rand between in a couple of places. I'm going to do another one way over here. Okay. And this is very much like your assignment. That's fine. Okay. But this one's going to be kind of a different size, right? I'm purposely doing that some are longer and some are not. Okay. So we are going to create a macro that basically takes this and it just copies and pastes it into values. Because I could take this, I could copy it, and then I could come over here and I could just do values. I right click, and now it's just the values. It's no longer a rand between, right? I'm going to have a macro that does that automatically by pushing a button, okay? And that's how you make a randomizer. So if you're like, in fact, let me show you what a randomizer does, because I have used it so much in this document. You might have noticed, that I have a lot of weird names. Like when you see my big list, I don't know if you've noticed in all this time that I have all these unusual weird names. Jamie Proper, like what is that, right? There's some weird names in here. I do a randomizer to do that. So I've actually created a randomizer. Let me minimize, hide all that. I don't know what that is, but where I can just click a button and it will randomly pull up names for me. Okay. So it's got all these female names, 4,000 female names. I just lifted off the internet. A whole bunch of last names over here, 4,000 last names, and then a whole bunch of male names, right? So, and I'm just basically all I'm doing is using a VLOOKUP table to randomize those names. Okay. So, oops, that got messed up. So we're actually going to create a randomizer in D4. Okay. But the first step is making sure you know how to do it without a VLOOKUP table. So that's what randomizers do. So we're going to come over here and we're going to select the information that we want to copy. We're going to make sure relative references is off. Okay, we don't want it to be on because we want to have different sizes. We want to be able to, because this one, when I had references on, it always made them the same size, right? But I want to be able to highlight this much or this much or this much, and it's going to do the same thing no matter what I have highlighted. So I'm turning relative references off. And that's kind of one of the hardest things about macros, and usually why I end up doing them once or twice, because I make little mistakes like that. Like, what do I want it highlighted? Do I want to click off? And it can be a little confusing, but just keep practicing at it. You'll get it. So I'm going to do this one, changing this rand between, I'm going to highlight all the things I want before I do the macro, because I don't want to highlight in the macro. I want to have already highlighted. So I'm going to do that, making sure relative references is off. I'm going to record the macro. I'm going to call this one paste, and I'm going to do Y, the letter Y as my shortcut. I'm going to click OK. And then all I do is do Control C, right click, paste with the values. And then I want to get the marching ants to go away. So I'm going to click off of here, and I like to do backspace. I don't like to do Control D because sometimes it does weird things. Now, wherever my cursor ends is where the macro is going to end. I don't have relative references on right now, so it's going to go back to wherever my cursor is. Okay, so that's just going to be how it is. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Okay, now I can highlight this. I'm going to highlight some of them. Okay, not even all of them. And I'm going to do Control Y, and it worked. Notice that when I click here, only the bottom ones are moving, right? These ones have been turned into absolute values. It doesn't matter what I highlight. Control Y is going to change it so it stays put, right? So by itself, I don't find this to be the most useful macro. I'm probably not going to use that very often, but when I combine it with a randomizer, it's incredible. It's very powerful, and I've used this in so many lessons. So to make a randomizer, you first have to have a lot of information. So in your assignment, you're going to be randomizing the stocks. So you have that list of stocks that you had, and so it'll randomize and pick 6 different stocks from a list, okay? So in order to have a randomizer, we have to have a lot of information. So I went ahead and just grabbed some. This is from another assignment of mine where we do Mad Libs, but I got a big list of adjectives, big list of nouns, big list of verbs, big list of adverbs, and I want to be able to push a button and randomly pick some adjectives or a noun or whatever. So that's important that I'm going to be using a VLOOKUP table. So I'm combining what I've learned with macros with a VLOOKUP table. So it's important that there's a number system here. Okay. And so they're each numbered. And so I can use rand between to pick one of these numbers, right? And I'm just going to do 1 through 40. I made the list really short. Okay. So next thing, I'm going to go in here and say, okay, I want to have an adjective and a noun and a verb and an adverb. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to create a big box to put this in to make it look pretty. Your assignment's going to be quite different from this, but the concept is the same. Okay, so we're going to do each of these just to give you some examples. Okay, so now I want to create a VLOOKUP table. So before I can even get to the randomizer, I want to create a VLOOKUP table that's going to choose a random adjective. Okay, so first I need to have a number to pull from. Okay, I need a reference. So I'm going to type a number in here, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm just going to pick a number. So I'm going to do equals VLOOKUP, this number, and then I'm going to grab, this is adjectives, so I'm going to highlight all my adjectives. Oh, make sure I include the number. Okay, and 2, false. Okay, so it's going to pull in number 1 because that's the number that's here, right? So if I did the same thing with noun equals VLOOKUP, I'm going to look at that number, and I'm going to highlight all my nouns. And 2, oh, whoops, sorry. Sorry. Did you catch that? I need to highlight everything, right? The 1 has to be in there, right? The number has to be in there. So I've got to do that, and then do column 3, right? False. All right, so we'll just do those 2 for now. So there they are. And now I want to make it a randomizer. So far you should be like, okay, it's a VLOOKUP table that picks whatever this number is. But a randomizer is going to allow this number to do a rand between. But I don't want to just do rand between because, like, if I just did equals rand between 1 and 40, well, it's fine. It's going to change every time I click on something, but that's weird. How do I make it change? I want to be able to make it change when I want to change. I want to push a button and then it makes it pick another random one. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do equals rand between 1 and 40, okay? And I'm going to do 4 of those, so I have 1 for each of these, okay? So this is set to round between. This one's not. And I would probably actually eventually either hide that. I think in your assignment I have you change the font color so it's kind of invisible and you can't really see it, okay? And in fact, if you look at my randomizer over here, this one I told you about, where is it getting that number? If you look up M7, it's getting it from a hidden column in here. So if I unhide, it's getting it from M7 right there. That's where it's getting it. Okay, so the randomizer is right here. That's the round between. And I just kind of hide it. I just make it so you can't really see it. I just remove it so you can't even see it. I hide it so it looks like it's magic, but really it's just hidden somewhere that you can't see. Okay, so here's my randomizer. We're just going to keep it in the same spot. And now I'm going to create my macro. Okay, so I don't want relative references on for this one. Okay, so I'm going to go to developer and I'm going to click on this number right here. And I'm going to go to record macro. Now, if I want them to do, I could create one button that makes them all change, or I could make a button that does each one individually. Okay, so I'm going to do one that makes them one at a time. So I'm going to put my cursor here. It doesn't really matter where my cursor is. It's just I like to start and stop in the same place. So I just pay attention to where I start. So I'm going to go ahead and record my macro, and I'm going to call this random. And I'm not going to assign it a shortcut key. Okay, it does not have a shortcut key. And you'll see why in a second. I'm going to click OK. And then random, all I do is I click over here and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paste it as a value. And then I usually like to backspace, get rid of the marching ants, and then end the same place I started, stop recording. Okay, now I can't run it because I didn't give it a shortcut. So what I'm going to do is in my developer tab, I'm going to go to insert and click on a button, and I'm going to just draw a button right here. And it's going to ask me what to attach it to. I'm going to attach it to, not my name, random is what I called it. I'm going to click OK. You can highlight it and type in, random adjective. Okay, you can make it bigger. You can't do a lot with these. I wish you could change the colors and make them look cool, but you really can't. Okay, so now I can just push the button and it's going to change. Now if I've hidden this and I've hidden this, now it looks really magical, right? Especially if I hide all this. Okay. Looks awesome. You can't tell. You're like, well, it's just a magic button that does what I want it to do. But all it's really doing is copying and pasting. Okay. So if I wanted to do all of them, okay, I would probably just first do one for each one so that I could do random adjective. I'd have to redo that entire step for each of these. Okay. But if I want to do them all, I would probably organize these the same way. So they're every other, like this, right? So they match the way these are lined up. And then if I was recording that one, I would just do, I go to my developer, record macro. This one I'm going to call all, click OK, and I would just do copy. I would just take this and copy it and paste it and go where I started, stop it, okay? And then I'm going to draw my new button. And then maybe this one, this is going to be all. And I would choose randomize all. I would say that. Okay, and then it'll do all of them at the same time. So again, it looks a lot better when you hide or somehow, maybe just change you could just change your font color to white so it looks like it's hidden, it's not. And I can get new ones every time. So I've created my own little randomizer. So that's just one way you can use a macro. This is certainly not something that your average Excel user uses. It's just something I've used macros for a lot that's kind of fun. And I just wanted to show you kind of a unique way you can combine all these different things in Excel to do amazing things that you're just like, it almost feels like magic, right? And in this example here, we could just combine using macros, using functions, using a VLOOKUP table. You could even do a data validation in here if you wanted to, right? I could make this say adjective, or I can pull it down and choose adjective, noun, or verb, right? So, and then just have one. I mean, there's lots of ways you could do it, but it is kind of a fun thing that you can do in Excel and opens up your mind to the possibilities, all the things you can do when you start to combine all the amazing things that Excel can do. So good luck on the application and have a good day.